And it is my pleasure today to be hosting this conversation with my very good friend, Alex Malikov. My name is Jennifer West. I'm the Artistic Director of Muse West Concerts and your host for this podcast, Take Note. And that's our notification telling us we're live, so it worked. And today would like to start by acknowledging that I am on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, and my guest is located on the territory of the Huron, Wendat, and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation in what is now known as Toronto. So, it is with great pleasure that I introduce my friend, Alex Malikov. He's an avid chamber musician, soloist, and music educator. Welcome to our podcast, Sasha. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. We're going to start with some rapid fire questions just so our audience can get to know you. And this is always a lot of fun. And you have to just say the first word that comes to your mind.
Sounds good.
Mozart or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
I felt bad.
Don't feel guilty.
Okay.
Your first instinct is always correct. And the next question, Debussy or Ravel?
Debussy.
That was much more confident.
I think so.
And after a concert, what is your favorite meal to enjoy?
Steak.
2 weeks in a row, I get musicians answering steak.
It's winter.
It's winter and
why.
It's cold.
Yes.
And what do you pair with that steak for a drink?
Most likely beer.
Okay.
Maybe a nice red wine.
Red wine and beef go together. So this is amazing. There's like at least 4 people that have answered steak after a concert. Wow. It must be the depletion of protein and people need to get their energy again.
Yes, it takes a lot of energy to play a recital or chamber work or a concerto. Yeah.
Do you have a small meal before you play, or do you kind of just wait till you're done?
No, I realized over time that it used to be that I didn't eat very much before, but for the past couple of years, I eat everything. I drink coffee, I drink tea, anything. So it's good to fill up before a big performance.
Who is this interesting man behind you?
That is Sviatoslav Richter, one of the greatest pianists of the 20th century from Russia. And it's been a lifelong sort of obsession with his love-hate relationship, I would say, with his recordings, with his pianism. Incredibly inspiring artist.
He is. He definitely is. And I have, like about 5 years ago, I was really into his recordings. And then I kind of grew away from them a bit. But you introduced me to his live performances of the Beethoven sonatas in Paris with Rostropovich. And that maybe put me back again.
That was an incredible night. That recital started apparently at midnight because it was during a festival and the hall was booked during the day. So this entire concert happened in the middle of the night.
I didn't realize that. That's amazing. Can you imagine playing a concert at midnight?
Must be very, very special atmosphere because, it depends what time of day one plays a recital because of our, relationship with the circadian rhythms. We feel one way in the morning, we'll feel differently in the evening. So I have never played a recital at midnight, actually. It'd be very interesting to do so. That
would be really cool. And speaking of playing recitals, and I'm going to be saying this a few times during the podcast so people hear it, we have a wonderful recital that Sasha is playing for us on Saturday, January 30th at 6 p.m. Pacific. That's 9 p.m. Toronto. Any other time zones, do your own math. We'll do a shout out to Calgary, 7 p.m. in Calgary, because we have a little audience there that's going to tune in. But you're going to be playing pictures at an exhibition for us. That would kind of be cool at midnight, I think, actually.
Yes.
To walk through a gallery at midnight.
Yeah. No one else around. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I often feel in that piece, there are so many times when whoever is guiding us through the exhibition is alone. I feel like they're very alone. Do you get that sense as well?
I think so. And that can relate to the fact that Mussorgsky was really quite lonely throughout his life. So there is that element, yes.
That's true. So, a more introduction to our audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and with whom did you study piano? We have a lot of kids that tune in to the interviews, and we like people to know, like, who were your mentors? How did you develop as a pianist?
Well, I was born in Russia and I started piano lessons there. My mom was forcing me to practice at first when I was very little, and I'm infinitely grateful for that. And then our family moved to Canada when I was 10 years old, and I started uh, again piano lessons with Dmitry Nesterov in Calgary. And then I moved on to study at Oberlin College with Angela Chang, uh, at Juilliard with Julian Martin, at Cleveland Institute of Music with Sergei Babayan, then uh, in Texas at the University of Texas with Professor Anton Nell, and now I'm studying with John Perry and James and Agneson at the Glenn Gould School.
That's
So it's
wonderful.
quite a journey for me.
That's a wonderful journey. And do you think that you're a professional pianist now? Is it still important to play for people, to play your program before you go on stage?
Yes, in fact, I know that many great artists have a team of ears that they trust, they regularly play for. I think it's very important. I'm not sure how many artists out there who just work solely on their own to prepare for these things.
And Babayan has a pretty famous pupil.
Yes, he has several
He
famous
has
people.
several, Mr. Trifonov being one of
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, for this concert coming up, you have selected music by Scriabin and Modest Mussorgsky. Mussorgsky was part of this mighty handful, this group of 5 composers. Who were these guys?
Well, these were radicals who were convinced that Russia. This was during a time in Russia when nationalism was desperately needed, and uh, in general, in art and architecture, in music, nationalism was really kind of on the rise. And these guys were led by Mili Balakirev, and they were all more or less they were not professional musicians. For example, Cesar Q was a general. Alexander Borodin was a very famous physicist. In fact, I'm sorry, chemist. Pardon me.
Wow.
In fact, he discovered a reaction that is named after him, a chemical reaction, and they firmly believed that the real Russian music was going to come out of the people with no influence from the Western education, from European education.
Hmm.
And of course, Rimsky-Korsakov was part of that group. He eventually became part of the education, Western education, and realized that it's not as bad as the other guys thought it would be. But they were very much against it. I mean, Anton Rubinstein, who founded the St. Petersburg Conservatory, was on very bad terms with Balakirev. They were really not getting along at all, and it was a very strong dichotomy.
So there was a group who thought that organically Russian music would come from the Russian people, and another group that said, well, we need some sort of influence from Western Europe. And this just sort of parallels Russia's history overall. Are we Asian? Are we European? Are we both? Are we neither? We see this in the political history of Russia as well, and their interactions with the countries around them. It's very interesting. So here's a musical question that just came to my mind. When you consider Russian folk tunes, are there intervals or harmonies that are prevalent, or does it depend on the region?
Yes, there are specific elements that are incorporated into Russian music by composers from the folk traditions. For example, the plagal cadence, minor 4, minor 1, instead of the leading tone 5-1. They were trying to avoid that as much as possible because it sounded so European. What else? There are several things. Um, the use of counterpoint as well, to have these outstanding counter voices to the melodic material, to the main melodic material. Yes, definitely.
And to what extent, I know a little bit about the development of liturgical music in Russia.
Hmm.
If any of my Orthodox friends are listening, please correct me in the comments if I get this wrong. But I know that a lot of the chant developed in Serbia, and there was some influence of Byzantine chant. But by about the 1800s, we hear that liturgical music in Russia has become a little bit more romantic in terms of its harmonic language. Does Orthodox music play a part in some of the music we hear from Tchaikovsky, Mussorgsky, Russian composers at all? Does it figure into that?
Absolutely. Even in the pictures at an exhibition, we will hear Russian chant in the last movement, the Great Gate of Kiev. It imitates these beautiful, and he specifically writes non-espressivo. So it has to sound extremely simple, no vibrato, so to say, very reverent kind of singing, even though it does go to a fortissimo dynamic, so it can be passionate, but it's also non-romantic at the same time.
So it's very much congregational singing, humble people.
Yes.
That's really cool. So pictures at an exhibition is what you've chosen to present for us next Saturday, January 30th at 6 p.m. Pacific. And we are so excited because this piece is not something we've programmed before. We've been doing concerts for 7 years and we haven't had this piece. And I first of all want to thank you for performing this for us. We're really excited. And I think that I can't pick a better pianist to play this for us and to kind of guide us through this piece. So for any of the kids or people at home that are going to listen to the concert next Saturday, what is the context of this piece? Why did Mussorgsky write it? What's it about?
Well, Mussorgsky had a friend who was an architect, designer, Victor Hartmann. And 5 years after they met, Victor Hartmann died um, from illness. So Mussorgsky was very upset. It was a big tragedy for him. But a very famous Russian critic, Vladimir Stasov, organized a posthumous exhibition of Hartmann's works. It was about 400 works on display. And this is the exhibition that Mussorgsky went to. Now, in this particular uh, piece, Mussorgsky describes that there are these promenades in between each movement, and it's Mussorgsky himself walking around the gallery looking at these paintings.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a very unique piece of music, and also just in general the pianism of it. It's again appropriate for the mighty handful who are so radical and so non-traditional.
Mhm.
um, it's a very different kind of approach to the piano. It's not Lisztian. There are elements of course, there are certain things that uh, are effective to do on the piano, but it's so unique considering that the heavy influence of Liszt and Chopin and Clementi and these traditions of keyboard playing.
Does it fit well under the hands? Is it difficult to play, or is it pianistic? It doesn't sound like it. It seems really awkward.
It was known for how uncomfortable it was and how non-pianistic. What's the word? There's a specific word for that. It was regarded as very almost unplayable.
Wow.
Even Islamé of Balakirev, which was at that time when it was written in the mid 19th century, was considered the most difficult piece written, but it was very pianistic. It was very Lisztian. It fit under the hand quite well, even though incredibly complicated. But this was 50 years ahead of its time. I think this influenced the music of Prokofiev. This, and I'm talking about specifically piano writing, not to mention the harmonic language.
Yes.
It influenced everybody. Debussy.
And when I listen to the aux and the cart movement, and I hear that ostinato in the left hand as the ox is pulling the rocks through the
Mhm.
countryside, and working so hard. I was listening to this yesterday. Full disclosure, I've previewed your whole concert.
Is everything okay?
It's perfect.
Okay.
So everybody needs to tune in because it's perfect. And I was listening to this and I instantly thought, wait, Prokofiev totally uses this in the Capulet Montague March in Romeo and Juliet.
Yes. Very heavy bass, very simple harmony. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. So, Pictures at an Exhibition is a collection of character pieces, and a lot of the people that tune into our podcast are high school students that are studying for their Royal Conservatory history exams, and character piece is one of the definitions. So, what's a character piece?
Character piece is, as the name suggests, you have to really find it's a very good type of piece to learn from a young age as early as possible because it really connects really any music, even non-character pieces, any music requires first and foremost an artistic image, not just learning the notes and delivering it, but there has to be some concrete idea, a personal connection to the piece. And I think these character pieces are a great opportunity to learn to do this because the composer gives you a character and gives you the wonderful music, and there's so much within that can be done. Um,
Hmm. And I teach grade 5 and grade 6, and I have a book at school called Modest and His Favorite Paintings.
mhm.
And it's all about Mussorgsky creating this piece. And the book is very open about him starting to be very depressed. And they even show him in his apartment having a temper and not wanting to see his friends. The book is actually quite open about his struggle. And throughout the book, it shows how he creates these images and what each picture shows. And I always get quite moved reading this to my class. I try to read it at least every 2 years to them, different kids each year, but it's very moving to see this tribute to his friend. And I think this is a wonderful piece for children to listen to because
Mhm.
literally we can hear the chicks bum bum ba ba ba. They're
Yep.
just we can hear them in the fingers
Yeah.
kind of floating around, and we can hear children running around in les Tuileries arguing in the garden and
Mhm.
playing. But there are also a few more sinister aspects of this piece.
Mhm.
um, that the way he represents some of his Jewish characters is a little bit strong.
Yeah.
And is that something that people have researched or being critical of with this piece? Because there's a few movements where it's pretty obvious. Is that something that has come up in your research of this piece?
In regards to the anti-Semitic elements,
Yes.
yes, there was incredible anti-Semitism in Russia at that time. Very strong. In fact, there was a quota. Like, for example, if you study the life of the violinist Yasha Heifetz, he was exceptional in that a Jewish boy was allowed to go to the conservatory. They had to talk to the great violin professor there, and so. But apparently, Mussorgsky was not particularly anti-Semitic. He loved the culture. He
Mm.
wrote down uh, Jewish folks tunes and music, and he used it. But it was there. It was part of the. Unfortunately, it was very strong in that
Hmm.
culture.
That's very true. So, one really cool part about this piece, and then we're going to talk about how Ravel orchestrated this. One really cool part is that there's this promenade that starts. And when it starts, it's very regal and it's very happy and confident. But the
Mhm.
promenade changes character every several movements.
Yeah.
And one of the promenades, I believe it's actually after the ox, is the one where it's tranquillo.
Oh yes, D minor.
Well, it's
Very
heartbreaking. It's
yes.
just heartbreaking, and I wonder, um, how does the promenade change throughout this piece? Tell us more about that.
They do become more and more introspective, introverted, uh, they not so much darker, but they acquire some kind of ethereal melancholy character. Perhaps it's appropriate, as this is an exhibition of a friend who passed away, so there must have been this kind of connection there. But it's interesting because at the end, the very last one, it's actually becomes kind of like one of the pictures, the catacombs,
Yes.
or the catacombs, and then the with the dead in the dead language. So it is the promenade, but it's also very creepy, very eerie.
Is it distant?
It's distant, but Mussorgsky never fails to leave the audience out of his heart. At the
Hmm.
same time, it's more distant. Maybe it actually becomes even closer because we
Hmm.
get to see him as a person, uh, a lot more intimately.
That's beautiful. Wow, well said. And for the kids out there, is there going to be a witch in this piece that the kids get to meet?
Yes, there will be a witch,
What's her
and she will
name?
come very unexpectedly. Her name is Baba Yaga, and this is very popular in Russian folk stories, children's stories. It's really interesting how, if we read the original folk tales, they are incredibly disturbing, considering that these are for children, but they're from many years ago. So, um,
Hmm.
yes, she flies around the forest in a steeple. Is that what it's called? It's like a vessel that she sits, and she has a broom that propels her somehow. And I
Wow.
mean, it's been shown in Russian cinema, Russian cartoons. She's always there, and sometimes she's comical, sometimes she's serious, but yes,
But she's always there.
she's always there. Yeah,
Ooh,
it's sort of a reminder of. I guess what it does is it makes one appreciate the good things, so that we're just thankful that we're not being chased around by someone,
by Baba Yaga.
by a big guy. Yeah.
Now, have people? I saw in the trailer that there was some really beautiful illustrations of the chicks in costumes. Have people done illustrations imagining what each movement looks or sounds like? Is there like art that has come along with this? Because those illustrations were so cool.
Well, that is the original um,
Wow. Okay.
picture by Hartman. There are several pictures that exist. The gnome, for example, the very first one is no longer. Um, it didn't survive, but there's a specific picture that is tends to be used. Same thing with the ox cart. The original is gone, but most usually the Van Gogh is used, the painting by Van Gogh. Um,
Wow.
the chicks,
That's
that's an
amazing.
original costume design for a ballet, for a French ballet that Hartman was the costume designer for.
That's
In fact,
spectacular.
it's
I
funny
did.
because a lot of the time, for example, the garden, which also doesn't exist, but the French garden, he designed. It was all about designing a garden, but he put some kids there quarreling, just for, uh, just so that they know the scale to a person comparison. I think so. But Mussorgsky took that as a complete image, and
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be showing a little excerpt of that to my class tomorrow and ask them if they've heard any of those intervals on the playground when people go na 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 boo boo.
exactly, and that's exactly what ta-dum, ta-dum. I will play it for you
Yeah,
because
go
it
ahead.
actually it supposedly imitates the word nyanya in
Na
Russian.
na na.
Nyanya, which is nanny, of course, like that. So
Wonderful. And that's a preview of what you can hear, people, but
yes,
in high definition on a Steinway. So, we've talked about the promenade. Now, this piece has been orchestrated twice, I believe. Once by
oh,
Ravel
many
and
many times,
oh, many, not just twice. Okay,
dozens of times.
dozens of times. Okay, this is good to
But of
know.
course, the most famous orchestration, yes,
Is
Ravel.
Ravel. So, tell me, when you were preparing this piece, were you having orchestral colors in your mind at different parts. And if you were going to teach this to a very capable student, maybe a student preparing for an audition, like an older adolescent, would you have them think of this orchestrally? Is this orchestral music?
Honestly, I think this is pure piano music,
Mm.
purely pianistic music. Even though I believe in thinking about everything orchestrally. Mozart sonatas are very orchestral. One has to know the sound of a Mozart symphony or an overture to or opera to understand, what how this music can work on the piano. But I understand that the pictures of an exhibition lends itself extremely well to orchestration. In fact, when I first started studying composition as a teenager, one of my assignments was to orchestrate a little bit of the pictures in exhibition, and it's a lot of fun. It's hard not to for a composer. It's such a great reserve of possibility. But I would really love to encourage um, not only seeing it orchestrally, but really seeing it from a pianistic perspective,
Hmm.
because it's such a great tribute to the possibilities on the piano that were not explored before. So I don't think any other instrument can play this other than a piano as well. It's just it ultimately that is the best instrument to play it on.
I agree. I really prefer the piano version. And I've been kind of looking around, and there actually aren't that many wonderful commercial recordings of this work that I really love from start to finish. Um, I believe Pogorelic recorded this. Am I correct?
Yes.
And I like that one. But other ones I've kind of sampled, I haven't been as happy with. But now that we've heard yours, this is going to be new level. It's so good.
One of my favorite recordings is actually Maria Yudina
Oh, of
playing this.
course.
It's incredible. Sviatoslav Richter plays it incredible. This is one of his strongest recordings.
All of these old Melodia record label
Right. Yeah.
recordings.
Yeah. Gilels and Richter.
Oh, my friends Sergey and Anya. If you're listening, Saroja and Anya, hello. They brought back 6 double disc albums of Melodia recordings for me from Russia,
Oh wow.
and I almost wept. I was so happy. And they said this is for Christmas, but they brought it in September. But I was thrilled. They're great. So Mussorgsky isn't the only thing on the program. Mussorgsky is the main chorus, but we have Scriabin as appetizer, I guess, or kind of the first act. Scriabin wrote 10 piano sonatas, if I'm not mistaken. I think
That's right.
10.
Yep.
Also a Russian composer. And you've selected something from his early era, the beautiful second sonata, just gorgeous. For me, he gets weird at around Sonata 6, so that's where I stopped listening. But if our mutual friend Michael is listening, he's trying to get me to listen to these more and to hear Scriabin differently. I'm working on it because I think there's a lot to love about Scriabin.
Hmm.
But these sonatas show his development and evolution as a composer. So how do we see Scriabin change throughout these sonatas, and where does the second sonata fit?
The second sonata is a very pivotal moment in Scriabin's life. One interesting fact that I would like to mention is that the pictures in the exhibition, which is a much larger piece, it's more than twice as long as the Scriabin sonata, was written in a span of 20 days,
Wow.
which is unbelievable. He just sat down, he wrote it. The second sonata of Scriabin took 8 years. He worked on it for 8 years.
Sounds like Brahms. Brahms sat with stuff for decades.
Yes, and that the second sonata lies in a pivotal moment, a pivotal time in Scriabin's life. It's it was written during the turn of the 20th century, so the entire world was entering this new era. Scriabin was heavily influenced by Chopin earlier in life, completely steeped in the influence of Chopin. And this with this sonata, we're slowly starting to see becoming the Scriabin the mystic that he will be
Hmm.
later in life. So he found this new obsession of mysticism that he turned towards.
What does that mean when we hear him referred to as a mystic? And what does that sound like?
Well, it's exactly what the word suggests. There's no way to describe it. I
Mm,
mean, we know that he was very interested in theosophy and the works of Blavatsky, Madame
yes.
Blavatsky, but it's a big mystery what that was all about. And he was really into that. And we hear that in his music, um, in harmony. His harmonic language changed. So instead of having these thirds, you know, tr- traditional harmonies, to having fourths,
Mm,
and of course the mystic chord. This is also something that can be seen with Schoenberg, Schoenberg's music,
that's true.
detachment from tonality.
What is the structure of the second sonata by Scriabin?
It's extremely compact. The first movement is a rather traditional sonata form. The second movement is only a couple of minutes long, and it's actually very. It can. This is where one can see a very strong influence of Chopin, because the Chopin second sonata has this very ominous, very strange finale, fourth
Yes.
movement. That's just, it's, you don't know where you are. It's somewhere dark. There's glimpses of things, but it's very hard to tell what
Yeah.
is going on. And it's, I think there's a lot of that in the second movement of the second sonata. It's very mysterious. It's very turbulent. There's a lot of anguish, and uh, he is saying something very strong. And what is it? It's very poetic, actually. It's this continuous notes. It's almost like, I mean, the right hand plays continuous eighth notes, but it's more like these waves of energy, just crescendo, these sforzandos, and then it immediately disappears into a pianissimo.
Wow. Hmm. And when you mentioned that Chopin second sonata fourth movement, I've always tried to understand what the heck is going on in that piece at the end. Like, I guess we're in the graveyard and the wind is rushing through the gravestones. That's apparently the program that fits it.
Right.
But it is such a strange little movement
Yes.
after, three very, pretty traditional romantic harmony movements before that. It's almost atonal. It's just bizarre.
Yes.
Um, you've picked an all Russian program for us, so we're going to talk about some Russian things now.
All right.
All right, let's go. Давай. We have a very loyal Russian audience in Vancouver. We've featured quite a few Russian pianists, and there just seems to be some magic. Whenever Russians sit down to play and they play their own music, there is just some there's just something that happens. I can't put it into words, but we hear this elusive and mythical term Russian piano school. And we hear about, all of these great pianists from the Soviet Union and before and after, and we've seen them in the Tchaikovsky competitions, we've seen them in the Clyburn, we've heard them. Is this a real thing, Russian piano school? And for those of you listening, I'm making quotes. Or is this a figment of the imagination? Is it made up nationalism? What demystify this for us, please? We're wanting to know.
Well, Russia has a very distinct history, musical history, as it assimilated itself into the classical music world in the 19th century. And are some there is a group of extraordinary personalities who were involved in the establishment of the St. Petersburg Conservatory and the Moscow Conservatory, namely Anton Rubinstein and his brother. Um, Anton Rubinstein established the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and his brother Nikolai established Moscow Conservatory. Now, they were not on good terms with the Mighty Five, so that, and Balakirev was the leader of this Mighty Five. He considered himself the heir to Glinka, Mikhail Glinka, who was the first real Russian composer. He
Yes.
worked during the first half of the 19th century, and he wrote the first Russian opera, A Life for the Tsar, about how Ivan Susanin distracted a mob from killing the first Romanov. And it's it's a very nationalistic opera, and nobody knew what to expect from it. And then suddenly, this Russian music was heard on stage in the Russian language. So Mili Balakirev did meet um, Glinka earlier in his life, and he created this Mighty Five. They went on to do their own thing. They contributed greatly to the development of music. They introduced really the variety and uniqueness to Russian music, while the European sort of side of Rubinstein and the conservatory um, used that to, they sort of carried the traditional Western education, and through that allowed the, the radicals to, because in the Mighty Five, a lot of them they wrote music, but hardly did they ever finish anything. They often the greatest works like Boris Godunov or Khavanshina, the two operas by Mussorgsky, or Prince Igor by Borodin, Rimsky-Korsakov, as they passed away, Rimsky-Korsakov took it upon himself, as he was the only one who was educated in Western music in the Mighty Five. He took it upon himself to reorchestrate and to finish his colleagues' works. So it's really thanks to him. So it's a combination of these things. And in terms of piano, there was Leshetitsky, there was Zverev, who was a teacher of Scriabin and Rachmaninoff. And these are extraordinary characters with very strong personalities.
And they had very strong beliefs that they wanted to continue. And I guess I'll ask my question in another way. As a piano teacher, I am so curious. Is there a specific way in Russia where children are taught, like, how are they taught piano? Because I know that from my Russian friends, what I've heard is you don't just have piano lessons once a week. You have theory, you have singing with a choir, and you have ear training. So if you're in a special school for music for children in Russia, you don't have a once a week 30-minute piano lesson on Zoom and then bye-bye, have fun time practicing. So it sounds like the musical education in Russia is a holistic picture. But for actual piano lessons, for beginners, is the focus on hand shape? Is it on finger strength? Is it on sound? Tell us more about that, because that is sort of the mystery that all of us piano teachers are trying to find.
Yes, I think that it's on all of those things. I think that Russia has great teachers who are actually not as acknowledged as much as they should be, because they are the ones who teach from the very young age how to play, and they don't get enough credit for it. Yes, I am sure that everything. When I was studying music in Russia, yes, we had lessons, we had piano lessons, we had choir, we had solfeggio, but then we moved to Calgary, and I continued studies at the Mount Royal Conservatory, now university, and we had solfege, we had chamber music, we had everything. So I was very lucky to be part of the school, and I think these schools do. This tradition is not just in Russia but everywhere. But what characterizes the Russian school? I think it's a mystery. It's a case by case scenario. There's just so many different personalities and so many different teachers involved. And especially now that the world has become so global, I think that more and more so, I think that the borderline between anything that could have been considered the Russian or the French or the German school, it's all starting to integrate together. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I don't think we're losing anything. I think it can be a enriching new sort of time.
It is very much an enriching time, because what we see is so many students from China, Korea, and Japan moving to Russia to study. This happens quite frequently, and we see Russian teachers moving abroad, and so we do get this mix. And when I moved to Vancouver, I didn't take lessons again for quite a while. But then once I settled in, the teachers that I found were Russian for a time. And so I feel like I've picked up some of that, like to have beautiful tone in your right hand, which of course, is not exempt from any other quote unquote school of piano. But there really is something special, I think, about,
Well,
especially when Russians play their own music.
I mean, if there's anything I could say, there's a certain darkness to the
Yes.
Russian tone, because when John Field wrote his nocturnes, the first nocturnes that were written, that Chopin was later inspired to write his nocturnes, he wrote them in St. Petersburg, where you know it's a very northern, very um, that kind of atmosphere of nighttime, and we know that the pianos. Well, I was very curious about this, and I was thinking maybe it has to do with the pianos that were coming into Russia at the time, because at the beginning of the 19th century there were these factories that were finally producing pianos instead of them being imported. The ones that were imported at the beginning were there. There would be generally the Viennese piano that was rather light and brilliant, and then the English piano that was heavy and dark toned. So that is probably what kind of piano was more prevalent that was produced in the beginning of the 19th century in St. Petersburg. Um, Even though they were generally Viennese pianos, they were considered to be heavy, on the heavy side. So perhaps that if on all accounts of Rubinstein's Anton Rubinstein's playing was very elemental, very he
Hmm.
didn't care so much to play all the right notes, but he seemed to have made this impression that it's more than just beautiful playing, that he started sort of it was the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know,
All of it.
all of it. So there's a sort of and I think that listening to Gilels, listening to Richter, uh, even Arthur Rubinstein, who moved to America, but he was a Russian pianist, and Horowitz, of course, it's this elemental quality that is just beyond. It's hard to it's hard to put it into a methodical description. It's something that just considered it in general. The Russian school, if I read about it, um, the analogy is that there's a lot more intuitive and nonsensical and sort of like that. So it's not
Yeah.
it's not as methodical. And those who don't understand the intuitive as well, they criticize that and say, well, that's there's no difference, and but it's mysterious, just like the mysticism that we were studying. It sort of prevails in that aspect
And
too.
maybe it should remain a mystery, because
Yes.
that's the effect it has on the audience. Is which kind of leads me to my next question: is what draws people to this Russian romantic repertoire? Because I'll tell you, as from a business point of view, when we program this type of music and we program a Russian pianist, we sell out the hall, and it's just it's so tempting to use that as a template for financial success in our industry. But there is something drawing people to this repertoire. So, what is it about Tchaikovsky, Mussorgsky? Who am I missing? Help me out, Sasha. All the Russian romantics. What is it that draws us to their music?
Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, the big one. I missed Rachmaninoff. Yes, of course.
I think that well, I think it's very personal,
Mm.
but again, I think it's the mystery aspect of it, and I think it's the kind of abandon. It's a sense of abandon that's also part of the culture. It's very hard to. I wouldn't want to really put it to words, because then it sort of loses meaning.
Mm. That's a good
But
point.
Russian pianists are often, even if for example, Leschetitsky, who taught in Russia, uh, he was Polish, but he taught in Russia. To him, he did not care about the score. He
Mm.
You can play however you want, as long as. So that, I mean, that's a little bit extreme, and maybe not a little bit too much so. But yes, it's the sense of freedom and abandon, I think.
Well said. So to wrap up, we have some fun questions. Let's pretend you're stuck on a desert island. What are 3 recordings that you would need to have with you to survive?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And they can be classical or non-classical. They could be anything.
Classical or non-classical? I would think definitely 3 recordings. One of them would have to be non-classical. Maybe, for some reason, Javanese gamelan pops into my head, which I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, oh my goodness, this is so hard to decide. Beethoven, complete works.
Complete works?
Um,
That's cheating.
all the Berlin Philharmonic digital concert hall catalog. Yeah. So
Yes, that's a good thing to have on a desert island. I think we could survive a desert island for at least a year if we had the Berlin Phil Digital Concert Hall. That's great. And one last question. Why do Russians love caviar so much? Every time I go to a Russian dinner party, it's caviar. What's up with that?
Well, the Russian culinary world is a whole topic in itself. I love my mother's cooking. I wish there were more places that serve Russian food, restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Caviar it comes out very rarely in Russia. It comes out on New Year. It comes out on very special occasions. And it's very nutritious. And I really like it very much myself. But yes, it's very much part of the culture.
Yes, I usually enjoy it at Maslenitsa.
Yes, yeah. And it's very good
That's
with
great.
crepes. It's very good with crepes.
It
That's
is.
the most
So
indulgent I can think of.
it's so indulgent with the blini and cream.
Exactly.
Yeah. If anybody out there is wondering, blini are the Russian version of crepes, and they are amazing. And the tradition is to have them before Great Lent, because that's when you can have all the food with butter and dairy and go crazy before you can't. It has been such a pleasure to delve into this world of Imperial Russia and its music with such a wonderful Russian Canadian pianist, my dear friend Alexander Malikov. And just a quick thank you to some people who made this concert possible. Stealth Ing, who did a killer job on video, and Matt Antal, who did a killer job on audio.
Amazing.
These are just superb artists in their own right. So for anybody who's kind of been out there wondering about these digital concerts, and I'm sure you've seen a variety of quality online, we can assure you that this is high def, professionally recorded, and it is superb. And it premieres this Saturday, January 30th at 6 p.m. And to be part of that premiere, tickets are on our website. I would like to thank our podcast sponsor, 2X Education, and our tech sponsor, Tom Lee Music, for the microphone that is conveniently hidden off screen today. And this is Jennifer West reminding you to take note. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much